Excellent. So we're just letting people into the room. If you're joining us, thank you for coming. We're just opening up the Zoom room now and we'll get going very shortly. We have 141 people registered for this webinar today. So we're just waiting for everybody to join before we get going. Thank you for making the time to join us today. Okay, looks like it's starting to slow down with people joining. So I'd like to get started on time. And I would like to welcome you all to this online session for National Archaeology Week, which is looking at maritime archaeology in the Asia Pacific. So let me start by introducing myself. I'm Natalie Pearson and I'm a counsellor of the Australasian Institute for Maritime Archaeology. And I'm also a researcher and a teacher at the Sydney Southeast Asia Centre at the University of Sydney. Just a reminder that we are being recorded today, just to let you know. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm coming to you today from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, here on the University of Sydney's campus. And these lands and waters were never ceded. So I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present and thank them for their ongoing custodianship and care of country. I would like to extend my thanks to the organisers of National Archaeology Week for reaching out to the Australasian Institute of Maritime Archaeology to host today's session. And the Sydney Southeast Asia Centre and Flinders University are also co-hosts today. So there's lots of us involved. Hopefully it's not a case of too many cooks in the kitchen. And please also let me thank Nadine Sterling, who is the South Australia representative for National Archaeology Week and an archaeology student at Flinders University. Sessions like this and really National Archaeology Week depends on the free labour of volunteers like Nadine. So thank you, Nadine, and also Caroline Spry for organising this session. So we're going to run the session like this. I'm going to introduce our fabulous panel. Then I'd like to share a short video with you, which you might have seen on some of the social media channels in the last week or so. But it will give you a great introduction to the project that we're going to be talking about today. Then we're going to dive into the questions. I've got questions for our panelists. And we'd really like to allow time for Q&A from our audience, that's you. So you can see at the bottom of your screen, the Q&A button. Feel free to pop your questions in there as we go along, and we'll make sure that there's plenty of time at the end to answer those questions. So thanks again for joining us. Really excited to get going on this panel on maritime archaeology in the Asia Pacific. So our panelists today, first of all, we have Dr. Martin Polkinghorne, who is a senior lecturer in archaeology at Flinders University. And Martin is lead chief investigator on the Australian Research Council project that we're going to be discussing today. Martin, did you want to unmute yourself and just give us a wave? Oh, you're not unmuted.
Hi there, Natalie. Nice to be here. Thanks for organising this session.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And then next, let me introduce my dear colleague in Indonesia, Zainab Tahir, who is Assistant Director, Shipwrecks Management Unit in the Indonesian Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries. Hi, Zainab.
Hi, Natalie. Hi, all panelists and all participants. It is great to meet you.
Thanks for being here, Zainab. It's great to have you. Next, we have Associate Professor Wendy van Duivenvoort, who is Associate Professor in Archaeology at Flinders University and also an AIMA counsellor like me. Hi, Wendy.
I'm unmuting. Hi, Natalie, and good afternoon or morning, wherever you are, to everyone else. And yeah, thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here today.
Terrific to have you too, Wendy. Thank you. And last but not least, Dr. Noel Tan, who is a senior specialist in archaeology from the Southeast Asian Regional Centre for Archaeology and Fine Arts. Noel, welcome.
Hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Terrific to have you all here today. Now, as I promised, I'm going to share a video with you. So bear with me while I share my screen. And this video is a really wonderful summary of the project that we're all about to embark on. And I wanted to share it at the beginning of our panel today because I think it's a lovely introduction to the objects themselves. So it's about 1.5 minutes. So over we go. Whoops. now. Can you see the right screen there? I'm just going to try again. Here we go. Okay. And can you see my screen, my video? Yeah, okay, here we go.
From the great empires of Southeast Asia, this is a collection like no other.
With the collection that we're working with in Indonesia and here in Australia, no, there's nothing really comparable.
Thousands of ceramics up to 1,000 years old, recovered from shipwrecks deep in Indonesian waters. Their exact origins, a mystery researchers are now hoping to uncover.
This collection tells the story of global trade and global identity in what some people call the age of commerce.
The ceramics were made in China, Vietnam and Thailand and traded for spices, textiles and other exotic riches.
At one point in the 14th and 15th century, there's said to be a ban on charter trading. And so this is when countries like Thailand and Vietnam stepped up and started making their own blue and white or their own replicas of blue and white to try and fill that market.
It's fair to say this isn't your average dining room set you'd find stashed away in your grandparents' cupboard. Whether it's the artistry or the crustaceans still attached to some of these pieces, these ceramics paint a detailed picture of what the world looked like hundreds of years ago.
The artefacts have been donated by prominent Adelaide lawyer Michael Abbott QC, who's collected them since the 1960s. The archaeologists now examining the treasures plan to return them home when they work out where that is.
These objects were salvaged and dispersed without recording their original archaeological find spots, and so it's a rare privilege to try and reconnect them with the places that they came from and discover their real cultural value.
A mission to bring lost stories back to life. Ethan Ricks, ABC News.
Terrific. I hope you all enjoyed that. I'm accidentally playing it again. But I think it's a great introduction to the project. And of course, we have Martin telling us a little bit about the project, which we're going to go into more detail today. So I know that we're joined by some maritime archaeologists in our audience, but really National Archaeology Week is all about sharing the work that we do as archaeology and heritage specialists with the broader public as well. So acknowledging that there might be experts in our audience, I would like to invite Zainab to tell us what maritime archaeologists do and to help members of the general public get a bit more of a sense as to whether it's just all about diving shipwrecks, or is there a lot of desktop research involved, a lot of analysis and interpretation? What does a maritime archaeologist do, Zainab?
Thank you, Natalie. In Indonesian context, I think we have quite dynamic approach in response to what maritime archaeologists do here in Indonesia. For example, under the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries, the main objectives are very much related to the effective management, interpreting, and public archaeology in terms of national ocean policy. If I might highlight 3 points that what we have done here as archaeologists under the ministry, how we're incorporating heritage management into marine spatial planning, and be part of achieving biodiversity conservation outcome. And also following the allocation of marine space by integrating heritage management with community-based marine ecotourism. And for all those activities, we really rely on our partnership with Marine Research Center and National Research Institute of Archaeology to support its historical data and its current condition of the wreck itself. And we base our management plan from this partnership with the research center. And yeah,
I think you've made a really good point there, Zainab, that it's not even really about a difference between diving and desktop research, but about how archaeologists are working with other parts of government, with communities, with shipping companies in relation to sea lanes, all of these other elements in terms of managing sea space and the objects in the ocean and, of course, the rivers.
Yes.
Wendy, I might jump to you. Zainab's given us a great introduction to
Sure.
maritime archaeology in the Indonesian context. Is it different in Australia?
Well, archaeology in itself is not different, I guess, between different countries, right? But I think what we find important questions to ask may be slightly different in Indonesia than they are in Australia, or what we consider our most valuable underwater cultural heritage, for example.
You've mentioned the words underwater cultural heritage there. Often people refer to shipwrecks. What other types of underwater cultural heritage can there be?
Underwater could be all sorts of things. They can be sites that are related to maritime activities, whether they are infrastructure, whether they are remains of lighthouses or port structures or maritime infrastructure in that sense. But they can also be completely unassociated with maritime activities, and they could be villages or submerged prehistoric sites underwater, right?
Okay, yeah. Now, having said that underwater cultural heritage is much broader than shipwrecks, I am going to ask you about shipwrecks now. And in the little blurb that we put together for this program today, we mentioned shipwrecks such as Endurance and Endeavour, which have been in the news lately. Is maritime archaeology, too focused on these celebrity shipwrecks? Can you share your views on celebrity shipwrecks like these ones?
Yeah, absolutely. And even there, I have to say that within the field of maritime archaeology, there has been a lot of discussions around the finding of these iconic shipwrecks or the searching for those type of iconic shipwrecks and whether that is actually considered maritime archaeology or not. To me, and to a lot of colleagues, but again, not everyone agrees with us. I don't think it's maritime archaeology at all. It has certainly historic value and it can become archaeology. But just the finding of a ship because it's iconic or because it's exciting, to me is more of a PR or a thrill-seeking exercise in that sense. And then what do you do once you found it? You put a media release together and then it's really exciting for 5 minutes or maybe 3 days. And then everyone forgets about it. And that to me is not archaeology. And we talk about this a lot with our students. And of course, like archaeologists that work on land, maritime archaeologists, of course, are and should be concerned with the identification and interpretation of physical traces of our past and our ways of life, right? And of course, there's a bit of a difference between underwater, maritime, nautical, marine archaeology. And you have to look at what those things mean to understand that and look at those type of iconic ships as well. And if you look at maritime archaeology, of course, that's the archaeological study of the human past and human interaction with the sea. And that can include sites that are on land. Sometimes we have shipwrecks in the beach or that are underwater. And they, of course, are related to our maritime activities, whether that's transporting things on the water or using the water, like for resources, for fishing or other things. And of course, you want to study that as a package in a systematic way via research questions that you ask rather than finding a shipwreck site. And sometimes there's good reason for it, whether that's, think about the HMS Sydney in Western Australian waters. That's to honor the descendants of all those men that died with the sinking of that, but also to reconstruct how those ships would have sunk in a war environment. And that can certainly become archaeology. Yeah.
Now, Wendy, you mentioned that shipwrecks are not always submerged. They can be on the beach.
Yep.
And that brought to my mind a really wonderful shipwreck in Thailand, the Panom Surin, which is a 9th century stone ship, 8 kilometres inland, which is, absolutely fascinating. So I might take us to Southeast Asia now by coming to you, Noelle. and get you to tell us why Southeast Asia in particular is such a great place to be doing shipwreck research.
Oh, yeah. If you look at the map of Southeast Asia, you have the waters going through right through it. It is the focal points of maritime activity from the West, from Africa, from India, and then from the East in China, Japan. The monsoon winds, especially for most of our maritime travel, we've been dependent on winds, and the change points is in Southeast Asia. So yeah, people coming from China, coming down to Southeast Asia, stopping and then waiting for the winds to change before they go on. And so within Southeast Asia, there is this very rich but almost invisible maritime culture, because a lot of it's on water, a lot of it is in living knowledge, not necessarily recorded. The idea of seafaring, navigation, the way you conceptualize the landscape, traveling. These days, take it for granted, like we hop on a plane 1 hour somewhere else, but traveling by sea requires you to travel in the right time for a number of days, takes years even to complete, and all this is showing up in shipwrecks are the most visible ones that we find, evidence for trade. We have ceramics from China bound for Africa. And in Southeast Asia, there's a lot of perishable goods that were traded in, but we know they were traded because they end up in trade lists. So sandalwood, animal hides, tusks, they don't survive, but they appear, and they evidently come from Southeast Asia. So there's a lot of it is a focal point for globalized trade. And even when we think of the age of European colonization, the impetus was to come to the Spice Islands to find spices which were produced in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, and you've mentioned organic materials there. I think you mentioned elephant tusks. Of course, we might think of silk. On some shipwrecks, they have found star anise that's 1,100 years old. So it is possible for these organic materials to survive underwater. If they're in a sort of a dark environment with little disturbance. But oftentimes, the things that do survive from these very old shipwrecks are ceramics. And ceramics are really a vital part of the historical and archaeological record when it comes to understanding Southeast Asian maritime histories and global maritime histories, actually. So I think now would be a really great time to start talking about this specific project, which is ceramic focused. So Martin, can you tell us about this shipwreck ceramic project that you're leading and that we're all on, and how did you come to be involved in it? How did it come to you?
Thanks, Natalie. Before I talk about the project, I just want to acknowledge that I'm on Kaurna land here in Adelaide, and I pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging here. So the origins of this project began a few years ago now, when myself and my senior colleague, mentor, also the foundation professor of maritime archaeology at Flinders, Mark Staniforth, we were approached by the prominent arts philanthropist and barrister Michael Abbott to look at his collection. And he had made a collection of Southeast Asian trade ceramics beginning in 1966, I think, till around about 2010. Now, I had some expertise in trade ceramics, particularly working in Long Vec, the 16th and 17th century capital of Cambodia. So I'd sort of seen a lot of trade ceramics in this place, but mostly what I was looking at was broken objects. And when Mark and I were introduced to these objects, and actually Wendy came in a bit later as well, we were quite astounded at the number of objects, the quality, that they're all intact. Also, there are a number of duplicates as well. So this is really particularly interesting for archaeologists, this idea of duplicates. Although I must say that this collection is dwarfed by the collection that's administered by Zainab in Indonesia. So this collection is around about 2,300, and in Indonesia, Zainab has over 200,000 objects.
We'll get you to share some information on that collection shortly, Zainab. But Martin, can you tell us more about what sort of ceramics are in these 2,300 that Michael Abbott QC has collected?
Well, I probably want to say being presented with this collection really sort of presents archaeologists with a great challenge, actually. You know, this collection has been amassed because of permissive legislation in Southeast Asia, but it's not, and through private public partnerships in Indonesia and other places in Southeast Asia, but it's been recovered from the seafloor without appropriate archaeological protocols. So, you know, our approaching this collection as archaeologists, we have to sort of think very carefully about what to do with it, but it also presents us with an opportunity. So there are sort of like must-dos that we must adhere by with this collection. And first is that we must abide by ethical standards. In this project, we're mostly using the operational guidelines of the 2001 Convention for the Protection of Underwater Cultural Heritage. We must have deep collaboration with Southeast Asian partners. And I'm delighted to see Zainab and Noel here today. We must also have like appropriate representation on the project from a range of different people. So we've got investigators from all across Australia in different disciplines, but also Indonesia, Thailand, Japan as well. Also, we must provide opportunities in Adelaide for PhD scholarships and for building capacity in Indonesia. So they're all the kind of things that go into this project. And it's about sort of, I guess, reuniting the collection that we have here in Adelaide with the collections in Indonesia and maybe more broadly in Southeast Asia. And it's about reuniting the collection here with the original find spots, discovering their archaeological contexts, and then finally reuniting them with their communities of origin. Now, in terms of the objects themselves, the majority are Chinese, Thai, Vietnamese. They're from this kind of age of commerce. Some of them a little bit earlier, but most of them date between the 15th and the 18th century.
Amazing. Well, we got a glimpse of them in that video before. I haven't seen them myself yet, but I'm very much looking forward to it. I know you've been working hard to get the collection packaged up and moved to Flinders. And just categorizing everything, getting everything numbered and catalogued. You did mention this collection in Indonesia, and I think one of the really wonderful things about this project actually is that it brings together not one but two shipwrecked ceramics collections, and this is where the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries in Indonesia comes in. Zainab, can you tell us about this collection, this ceramics warehouse in Ciliwungsi? Yet another ceramics collection I haven't had the privilege of visiting yet. But you have spent quite a lot of time with these objects. Tell us about them. Where do they come from?
Ciliwungsi is a storage for more than 200,000 collections from shipwrecks. And from these 200,000, we've managed under the state assets for about 148,000. It is a huge collections. It is discovered from the most popular maritime trade routes. It is in Sumatra and Java Sea. It's from Sumatra, Belitung, and also Riau. Most of the findings, more than 80%, are Chinese ceramics, Chinese products, and but there are also significant Southeast Asia products, for example, fine baseware, and a variety of and it comes from start from 9 to 18th century era. And so when we talk about them studying ceramics, I think collections in Cilengsi have that kind of richness in terms of maritime history.
Yeah, I think it's really remarkable. Oh, sorry, you've just frozen. Yeah, please go ahead. You're back.
Yeah. Besides Cilengsi, that we have a collections in Marine Heritage Gallery, as you visited once, I think.
Yes, I have been to the Marine Heritage Gallery, which is in Jakarta, and it's actually just sharing for those joining us today. It's in the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries building in central Jakarta, and it's open to the public, and it's also open to government officials. And I think it's a really wonderful place where Zainab and her colleagues have been able to showcase some of the incredible collections, some of the incredible objects that are part of this bigger collection in Cilengsi. You mentioned that some of the objects are from the 9th century. I'm assuming they're from the Belitung shipwreck. And do you also have a large collection from the Cirebon shipwreck? That's 10th century. Yeah.
Yeah. We have a large collections from Cirebon, and it is stored also in Cilengsi. And this is a state assets. When I talk about the state assets, it means that it is the collections are open for display, for education, for museums and interpretations.
So there's a question that's come through, and I do have a few more questions for our panelists, but I think this question is something I'd like to introduce into the conversation now, and it's about how this collection in Indonesia came together. Were these objects collected by the Indonesian government, or were they collected by public-private partnerships, for example, and then the Indonesian government took ownership of them?
Yeah, it is collected from Indonesia has a national regulation allow private partnership to salvage the collections and to salvage the cargoes, and the regulations allow to split the cargoes. 50% goes to the company and 50% goes to the government. So what is in Cilengsi is the 50% 50% the government
share. Yeah.
Yes, the government share.
So the Indonesian government, as I understand it, for about 20 years permitted commercial salvage of shipwrecks in their waters. And as you say, part of that arrangement was that the commercial salvagers had to share either 50% of the objects or 50% of the profits with the Indonesian government. So in a way, this big collection at Cilengsi is a legacy of that commercial salvage legislation. And because they were commercially salvaged, that puts them up against, in contradiction to the 2001 UNESCO Convention on the Protection of the Underwater Cultural Heritage, which, I think it's worth pointing out, Indonesia is not a signatory to, and in fact, the only Southeast Asian country that is a signatory is Cambodia. So just to provide a bit of extra context around how those objects came to be in this collection. So the Indonesian government is continuing to care for them. It sounds like an absolutely enormous task. I'm sure the collections management team are very busy making sure that the ceramics are well looked after. Really an incredible opportunity through this project to bring the Cilengsi collection in Indonesia into conversation with the Michael Abbott QC collection. And one of the aims of this project is to discover the cultural value of these ceramics using archaeological science. What sort of techniques are you planning to use to determine the origin of these objects? Will Will they be invasive techniques?
Sorry, this is a question for me, Natalie.
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah. So, I mean, we're really privileged to study these collections alongside each other, and it's really exciting to start this work with Zainab and the Ministry of Marine Fisheries. So, I guess there are sort of different tiers or different techniques that we can do. I mean, our first objective is really to discover the find spots of this collection here in Adelaide, and we're going to do that by comparing it with the collections in Indonesia, and we'll use different methods of archaeological science that will allow us to kind of like create a fingerprint, if you like, of each object. Now, the methods that we plan to employ are both non-invasive and invasive. For instance, on the non-invasive side, we'll be applying like statistical analysis of shape recognition and kind of machine learning algorithms of shapes and decorations to develop like typologies. And so this is an emerging method in archaeology, but it's been well proven for rock art and a whole bunch of other things as well. It's been used on stone tools, but it's never been used on ceramics before in this way. And we're particularly lucky that we have very large data sets to do this on. And it's not really a very difficult thing to collect data on. And so I guess the second tier of analysis is to take samples from the objects and to determine their geochemical profiles. So along with my colleagues here today and some other people, I mean, these methods are proven as well. So basically we can determine the manufacturing origins, but also compare different lots with different lots. We also plan to study the marine incrustations. There's all kinds of like isotope analysis that you can do on that, and also study the surfaces of the ceramics microscopically to discover like the secondary or tertiary deposits. So this particular work will be destructive, but we've got a lot of experience in doing this, and we're not going to damage the integrity or the aesthetic appearance of these objects. I can assure everyone about that. So anyway, in sum, we've got a range of different techniques we're going to throw at them to discover the find spots and to reveal the cultural stories and the scientific stories behind the objects.
Awesome. You mentioned marine incrustations, which just made me smile, because in that video I shared with you earlier, the reporter does talk about the crustaceans on the objects, but I can assure you there are no lobsters clinging to the side of these objects.
No. There are a few Kretek filters around, but no...
Indonesian cigarettes. Very good. Very good. Okay, so you're talking about these archaeological science techniques, and part of the project is training the project team up in these techniques, including PhD students from Southeast Asia, which is a really integral part of the project. I actually wanted to come to Noel for this question regarding education and skills building, because, Noel, so much of the work that you do is around education and capacity building. How important is it to embed these sort of skills building activities into research projects?
Oh, I think it's absolutely essential. I think we are in a stage where local archaeologists, there isn't a local capacity to do these projects, even if we wanted to, and a lot of it is down to the lack of training and lack of resources. And it is one of those things where especially for a project like this, underwater archaeology analysis, highly technical, requires a lot of specialized skills, and there aren't many people, if any, in Southeast Asia that can do these. And so it's really important to be able to, in the doing of a project like these, to be able to also train personnel in the region to do projects like these in the future. I think one of the really important things for archaeology in Southeast Asia is that we don't have enough people specialized in certain areas, and building up that capacity is just absolutely important. It is, yeah, absolutely essential.
I mean, it's kind of a Dorothy Dixer, which is like an easy question, right? When I ask you about education and skills capacity, and, you know, just a particular shout out to you, Noel, with the work that you do at CMOS BAFA. You know, you're running this incredible rock art course at the moment, which there is a fee involved. It's a very small fee, and you've managed to get together experts in and from and of Southeast Asian rock art. And, you know, you're just creating incredible opportunities for a really inclusive approach to archaeology in Southeast Asia that showcases the skills of Southeast Asian archaeologists, and also the incredible, you know, sites in Southeast Asia as well. So shout out to your rock art course. Not quite related to the topic that we're discussing today, but I did want to mention it because I think this issue of capacity building is so important. Now, Martin mentioned, was it Martin or Zainab? One of you mentioned multi-duplicate ceramics. So, you know, this is, I guess, a question for those of us who work in museums. And Zainab, you know, you're working in the Marine Heritage Gallery. You have, for example, the Belitung collection has thousands of almost identical bowls. What are the challenges for museums in displaying these sort of multi-duplicate ceramics and making sure that, you know, there is public acceptance of these objects in the first place, establishing whether the public is interested in objects that have been commercially salvaged, and also displaying them in a way that makes it engaging and interesting for visitors?
Yes, it is quite challenging displaying the multi duplicates, the collections, as I mentioned, that mostly more than 80% cargoes for each shipwrecks are bowls. So what is at the end we can't put them all into a showcase, but strategically we put we expecting that we can share actually the collections with other museums and local government museums or universities. We expect that, and we put in the plan in a planning because of a huge variety of them, not variety, a lot the similar collections, but I know this is challenging, but I believe that we can put it in a good display. But it is more than a display. Actually, it is interpretations. It is showcasing and bring the collections into public, and as close as possible to the community. And the good thing about Marine Heritage Gallery, it is displayed in Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries. It will be different if it is displayed under the Ministry of Culture. I believe that I assume that more people know about the collections, more people aware about historical value of the objects in the ministry of Culture rather than in the Ministry of Marine, and bring them into the collections is part of the rising awareness of the ministry itself, that heritage is actually part of the ocean, and when we talk about marine, this is not only about fisheries, not only about coral reefs, but also heritage. So Marine Heritage Gallery itself not only bring the collections as close as possible to the wide public, but also to the high official in the ministry. That it means that we put them as close as possible with the decision-making policy to know more about the collections, the value itself, and the quite challenging actually how to build a narrative, about the objects and make a connection with them and strengthen the connection between objects and also and marine affairs. So it is quite challenging, but it is great. It is great job to do.
Yes. Well, I really appreciate what you've done there by, mapping out who your audience is. It's not just this amorphous general public, but what you're saying is that these objects can be used to influence policy makers, which is really, really interesting. And I'm thinking about it's UN Ocean Decade of Ocean Science. There's a lot of work being done on the UN Sustainable Development Goals in universities and elsewhere at the moment. And if I'm thinking about UN Sustainable Development Goal number 14, which is life below water, I think the logo for that is a fish. But, you've just made the really important point that there is also vestiges of human life below the water through our cultural heritage in the water. And museums play a key role in interpreting that and sharing that for audiences, for the public, for policymakers. So look, we've got about 18 minutes left, if my calculation is correct. We do have a couple of questions coming through the chat, which is wonderful. And one of them is about actually a question I wanted to ask Wendy relating to ethics. So I might read out this question from our audience member and address it to you in the first instance, Wendy. So the question is from Kelly Clayton. And Kelly mentions the recent Blood Loot mini-series on television, which I haven't seen, but sounds interesting, which strongly communicated the message that illegal removal and movement of cultural heritage has been linked with crimes of terrorist financing. Given you think that many of the collection items were illegally obtained, how will you go about publishing the results of your research without promoting further looting? You still, yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So there's actually, it's a really good question. And there's a number of levels to what's written here, right? So, and there are some wonderful books out there as well that have been like via investigative journalists who've done studies over the years of illegal removal of artifacts from sites that make them their way into the art market via auction houses like Christie's and Sotheby's, and that's incredibly problematic and something that's really hard to stop as long as people are collecting and they get excited by these type of things. And nowadays there are more and more things in place to mitigate that and to investigate it, to try and stop that, right? With this particular collection, there's no question on whether it was illegally obtained or not, because permits were in place. So they were legally obtained under Indonesian legislation and law, right? Whether it's ethical is a different thing. And that may be different for Indonesian organizations, may even be different for the culture department that Zeynep works for, or for marine fisheries. And for Australia, if you look at rule number 33 of the UNESCO Convention for the protection of underwater cultural heritage, of course, there is written that collections that come from excavated sites need to stay together, not just for displaying purposes, but for research purposes. So that the original excavators, but also people who come after, can access those materials in the future to study them again. And that's, of course, where the ethical question comes in. Zeynep already said they've got like 50% of some of those collections in Indonesia. That's of course not the whole collection. And then of course, with this type of excavation, commercial salvage excavations, as Martin already alluded to, the collection that was amassed here in Adelaide is all complete pieces. And I suspect, and I'm sure many archaeologists with me, is that what was left on the seabed or discarded by the commercial salvagers or companies were the not complete pieces or organic pieces or things that didn't have a monetary value. And that's of course where the ethics become really problematic, because these type of collections will tell us nothing about seaboard life, about life on board those shipwrecks for the crew. And that's where we get really important archaeological information, but they also don't tell us about other cargoes that were carried. Were there spices on board? And we have those from underwater sites, from the archaeological record. Those type of things would have been completely lost. And so, yeah, that's where ethics, of course, are problematic. I don't know how we will go about publishing the results of this research without promoting further looting. And that's maybe something that Martin can say something more about. Because of course that's something that I'm sure none of us would like as an outcome at all, because we don't want to promote looting or the destruction of archaeological sites in this manner.
Thank you, Wendy. That's a great answer. Martin, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, just quickly, I can see that Zainab also wants to speak on this. I mean, I will just say that sort of these issues of cultural patrimony and illegal excavation and salvage are probably the single biggest issue that museums and collectors and archaeologists will deal with in the 21st century. But I would also say that, yeah, this particular collection has been collected under sort of, permissive legislation in Indonesia. So there's sort of no question about that. But our job now is to, and part of this project is to interrogate this issue, really. I mean, how much archaeological information has been lost? So we have the material in Indonesia, which is sort of this half of the objects, and then we have this other collection, which is presumably been traded or collected because of its high monetary value. We can, by looking at both together, we can begin to assess how much information actually has been lost or not. With that, I'll hand on to Zainab.
Yeah, Zainab.
Oh, thank you, Natalie. The questions. It is challenging. I can't say it is not. It is easy that how to make a publication not promoting lootings, but based on my experience facing the commercial salvage policy, actually we kind of raising scientific community. We need to build like a strong publications that from these publications we need to make it the publication need to reach a wider public. The public can understand. Decision making needs to, as I mentioned before, that not only public but also decision maker, high official decision making policy that needs to be aware, to be more aware about the value of the heritage itself. It is true that there is a different perspective seeing heritage. So what I might, for my personal opinion, is that we need a strong interpretations that reach in every level of the community, including the high level of the high official. And I believe that this is our responsibility in the scientific community. They understand about the value of the object, to communicate this, not only that in the language that public can understand, in the language of public decision-making policies, can understand that every institution has their goal, how to incorporate this without losing the value, the historical value, the integrity of the wreck itself. This is and I find this quite challenging, but I believe that we can do it as strong as as I mentioned, that the way we need to find publication strategies, communication strategies, maybe heritage diplomacy strategies, how to reach a multi-level of audiences through our publications.
Thank you all. Noel, I don't know if you wanted to add to that, but I would like to. Yes.
I did. I think this is something that we all struggle with, and maybe just to, how do we know that having a publication about this will also promote the attitude against looting? And I think that's an opportunity that a project like this can have too. We should see projects like these as opportunities for education all around. And there are many perspectives that are going to come out of this. And I think, this project is one of many opportunities to engage these different perspectives, because not everyone's going to agree. But if we don't talk about it, then problems like looting will continue, because looting happens because people largely don't talk about it.
And these objects that have been salvaged legally, commercially, perhaps unethically, are sitting in warehouses, and they need care. They need ongoing care. You can't just put them in a warehouse and forget about them, or they will deteriorate. So thank you to our panel for answering that question. And also, Kelly, thank you for your excellent question. We do have lots of other ones. Michael Pearson, thank you for joining us, makes the excellent point about the value of duplicates being not related just to interpretation and presentation, but also research. I think this is something Wendy touched on. And Michael asks, is the Flinders research likely to build wider research questions that strengthen the scientific value of the Indonesian multi-duplicate collections? Zainab, did you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. That this is not just about the duplicates. This just not about interpretation, but also we need to. I agree with that. The comment, Natalie, that we need more to strengthen the historical value of the objects. Actually, dealing with the multiple duplicate collections. In terms of showcasing, bring it into public, that based on my experience, that we need the tools, we need display tools, we need museologists. I think we need a creativity to make it to make the objects communicate to the public. I mean, the object communicated to the public. The message of the object itself come to public without putting passively in the warehouse. So I remember Korea. One museum in Korea displayed the multiple duplicate collections in a nice way. And I believe the interpretations, it goes with the good interpretations, and also narrative and scientific research related to this follow the collections.
Okay, now we're coming up against the clock, so I just want to draw attention to two comments from some of our colleagues. First of all, Shanatria, hi Shanatria, makes the excellent point that there is a new research requirement for doing research in Indonesia, with new requirements for foreign researchers, data sharing, ethics clearance, and various other new things that we need to think about. So Shanatria, thanks for reminding us of that, and we will be sure to allow plenty of time to get our paperwork together to do the research in Indonesia. But we do have an Indonesian partner, which is great. And then the other comment is from Agni Mokhtar, who makes a comment that while archaeological science is suitable as the sole method for the Michael Abbott collection, in which the context of the objects is all but lost, the Chiliungsi collection should be interpreted together with the ship in which these objects were found. So we know that some of these objects were from the Cirebon, were from the Belitung. And Agni makes the point that it will affect not only the narrative of the objects, but also the legal consideration surrounding these objects. So that's an excellent point, Agni. And thank you both Agni and Shanatria for those questions. Now, just one last question, and it does pick up on that archaeological science issue. This is from Lelaine Little. Lelaine, thank you for your question. I might direct this to Martin. In the surface analysis of these objects, will there be analysis of possible contents if they were used as vessels during transport? So if they were holding organic materials, for example. If these objects were in a shipwreck, is it the assumption that these objects were factory new before they could be used by consumers, or were they in use? Thank you.
Thanks for that great question. And this is certainly a very exciting research avenue that we propose to go down. So, I mean, there are different categories of ceramics. We have very small ceramics, which were clearly mercantile objects, but then we have a set of ceramics which are storage jars, which are in fact kind of the ancient shipping containers of the maritime Silk Route, and some of these are produced in Thailand, China, maybe even Myanmar itself. And so some of these held ceramics as objects, but some of them held different kinds of commodities, forest products and these kinds of things. Now, residue analysis is a very common method in archaeology. We'll probably have to refine our methods a little bit because these have been sitting underwater for more than 1,000 years, and often the signatures aren't there, but it's definitely something that we want to explore. What is being traded throughout Southeast Asia and across the world by looking inside the jars.
Sounds so exciting. I can't wait to get going on this project. So many different things to think about, and our audience has asked some really great questions. Thank you for your engagement today, everybody who's joined us. Before we wrap up, and before I say thank you to all of our panelists, I would like to throw to Wendy to just tell us a little bit about the conference that you're convening in Adelaide later this year. And, if people are interested in learning more about maritime archaeology, can they come along to this conference?
Absolutely. We welcome everyone who's here to come over to the conference in September. So this is the Australasian Institute for Maritime Archaeology conference, which we're hosting here in Adelaide on the 22nd and the 23rd of September. And the conference theme will be decolonizing maritime archaeology, heritage and museums in Australasia. And we're hoping to address inclusiveness in our field. And then decolonizing, it's not a smart choice of words, right? But we thought we'll just throw it in there anyway, just to get discussion started, and hope that we can provide an opportunity to engage in a dialogue around the meaning, approaches and lessons for those type of organizations in our underwater cultural heritage, and that we get attendees from all over the world to enable voices and perspectives that are not always heard. If you go to the AMA website, you'll find more information. And I saw that that our keynote speaker is attending today as well. So that's not on the website yet, but that's Lynette Russell from Monash University. And yeah, and we have another range of public speakers that have just been confirmed. One of them is Jay Hagler from Diving with a Purpose in the US. And he's been working on slave shipwrecks with African-American trained diving archaeologists and divers. Yeah, and we also will have a young man who is a Indigenous American or a Native American who has been trained together with others to investigate and map submerged prehistoric sites from their own culture. And so we'll hear from that and those type of programs that are happening. And if anyone here would like to propose a session, that's open still for another 10 days or so. So if you can think of something exciting, please send it in and go have a look at the website.
And I've actually shared the link to the website in the chat there. So please come along. Thank you for joining us today. And particular thanks to Nadine for being our wonderful National Archaeology Week volunteer and co-host. Thank you to AMAR, thank you to Flinders, thank you to SEAC, and most of all, thank you to our fabulous panel. It was a great discussion, and I'm really looking forward to working with all of you and continuing the conversation. Thanks again, everybody. So we've still got some people in the room, but Nadine, I think you're good to end the webinar once you've saved the chat, if that's okay. And yeah, thanks everybody so much. Gosh, an hour goes by quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It does. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks everyone. Yeah, thanks Nadine, Wendy, Zainab, Noel, and Natalie. It's great to see you on this forum. Thank you again for being part of this project and joining us, you know, as part of this sort of announcement that the project's starting for this webinar. Yeah, it means a lot. Obviously, the ethical issues are things that we have to address head on. But having a public forum like this, I think, is a way to offer transparency about what we're doing, and keep it open in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's end the webinar now. Thanks again, and see you all in Adelaide, I hope.
Okay.
Great.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Wendy.